Buenos Aires is the sprawling capital of Argentina and by far the country's most populous area, with over 3 million people living in the city, which increases to over 30 million if you include the surrounding metropolitan area. Buenos Aires is home to just over a third of Argentina's entire population. It is one of the most visited cities in Latin America, with a distinctly European influence in its architecture and culture, leading to it being given the nickname the Paris of South America. We spent 2 weeks in Buenos Aires, in which time we explored many of its popular neighborhoods, visited countless impressive landmarks, and sampled many of Argentina's most famous foods.
If you're new here, we're Kitty and John, and we love to travel and experience new cultures. Whether exploring our own backyard in the UK or watching volcanoes erupt in Central America, our passion for travel never seems to fade. Recently, we've been spending a lot of our time in South America and have really fallen in love with the continent, so make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you'd like to see more content from this beautiful part of the world. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Buenos Aires is seriously huge. If it's your first time in the city, it can be pretty daunting trying to figure out where to stay. But there are a few neighborhoods that we would recommend based on both safety and reducing your travel time to other parts of the city. We stayed in Recoleta, home to the world-famous cemetery and sandwiched between the popular areas of Palermo to the west and Monserrat and San Telmo to the south. We enjoyed this central location, and the Recoleta district itself is very safe and full of museums to explore and green parks to relax in. We paid about $38 per night for a nice spacious apartment here. Any of the other neighborhoods we mentioned would also make good bases though. Palermo is home to the trendy Palermo Soho area, as well as countless beautiful parks to explore. Monserrat is the historic heart of the city where you'll find many of the grandest buildings. San Telmo gives off a distinctly bohemian vibe with antique stores and cafes on every corner.
Wherever you decide to base yourself, getting around Buenos Aires couldn't be easier. The city has a widespread and very efficient public transport system, including buses, subway, and trains, so you can get literally anywhere you want to within the metropolitan area. Argentina is actually the first country we've been to that has a universal travel card that you can use across the entire country. First, you'll need to pick up a subway card at any subway stations or eligible kiosks and load it either using cash or the app. It was easier for us to top the subway card up with cash than download the app because our app still couldn't find it because our phones are from the UK and not from Argentina. Also, just a word of warning, it's better to top up your subway card in the morning because some of the stores get only a certain amount of credit. Once they use that, you won't be able to top up your card with the amount that you would want to. Once you've loaded your card, you can just tap it and use it on any of the buses or subways or trains. We personally used buses more often than any other modes of transportation because they were very regular and they took us wherever we wanted to go.
Just like with any major city, Buenos Aires is made up of lots of different neighborhoods, and they all have certain things and features that help differentiate them from each other. In this video, we're going to try and explore as many as possible to give you an idea of some of the best neighborhoods to visit whilst you're here in Buenos Aires. As we were staying in Recoleta, we decided to begin our Buenos Aires exploration there. Recoleta is an affluent neighborhood with many Parisian-style townhouses and pleasant parks to wander around, but by far its biggest draw is the Recoleta Cemetery. Just like in Shella in Guatemala, our first stop here in Buenos Aires is actually a cemetery, one of the most popular places to come in Recoleta because it is beautiful. Like the mausoleums here are gorgeous. They really do remind us of the Shella ones, just a little bit less colorful. One big difference between this cemetery and the one in Phello though is that this one is a lot more expensive. I mean, the Phello one was free to enter. This one was a whopping $16 per person to come in. Definitely the most expensive cemetery we've ever been to. Built in 1822, the cemetery contains over 4,000 vaults, from simple mausoleums to ones that look like mini mansions. Many notable people are buried there, presidents of Argentina and Nobel Prize winners, as well as Argentina's First Lady, Eva Perón. It's been voted as one of the world's most beautiful cemeteries cemeteries on numerous occasions and is laid out like city blocks, with wide tree-lined avenues branching off into smaller side areas lined with mausoleums of all shapes and sizes. Certainly worth your time, but a little overpriced for foreigners in our opinion. From the cemetery, we walk down through the park to the nearby Museo de Bellas Artes. It's free to enter and houses one of the largest collections of public art in Latin America. Ground floor is filled with much older works, which we definitely enjoy more, whereas the second floor is made up of much more contemporary and modern art, which we don't really get. After admiring the artwork, we headed across the colorful bridge next to the gallery, where you get nice views of the Facultad de Derecho, part of the University of Buenos Aires, and then continued to the park next door to see the steel Floralis Generica sculpture. Although it didn't look at its best when we were there, as the water in the reflecting pool underneath wasn't there and two of the petals were missing. The final must-visit spot in Recoleta is the El Ateneo bookstore. This is no ordinary bookstore though. It's housed inside a converted 20th century theatre, which makes it probably the coolest, if not one of the most touristy bookshops we've ever visited. Bookshelves line all the balconies and ground floor seating areas, and the stage has been converted into a cafe. Just be prepared to pay a premium if you want to buy a book there. Whilst it's not really in Recoleta, but the bordering San Nicolas district, the Teatro Colón is so close to the bookstore that you might as well try to see it in the same day. Located in the center of the huge Plaza La Vacha, this theater is known for having some of the best acoustics in the world. So if it's within your budget, you should definitely try to catch a show there.
Bordering Recoleta to the north, Palermo is a huge district made up of loads of smaller areas and the largest collection of parks in the city. We begin the day in the trendy Palermo Soho area, where you find countless bars and cafes along leafy cobblestone streets, making it a great place to come in the evenings. It's still worth wandering around during the day though, because it is one of the best areas in Buenos Aires to see some street art. San Rafael is definitely the highlight, with every spare piece of wall covered with one beautiful mural or another. Once we were done taking pictures, we headed to the north of the district and the first of many parks there. The botanical garden is free to wander around and is home to a gorgeous greenhouse with many rare plants from around the world. Then we headed through the Buenos Aires Eco Parque, probably the most unique park in the city. It's a full-on zoo, so you'll be walking along paths through former animal enclosures, some of which still contains the animals. Let's just say we were a little bit surprised when we saw a couple of giraffes there. The animals here have been rescued from captivity, can't be released back into the wild for various reasons. They're used for education and awareness. Many of the animals, though, are allowed to wander freely around the park. At the bottom of this park, we crossed over into the Parque Rosedal, which, as you might have guessed, contain many roses.
Other than our initial walk through that Palermo Soho area here in Palermo today, the majority of the time has just been walking through the different parks of Palermo. This whole area near the coast is just super green and it just seems to go on forever. Like, we're now currently in the Rose Garden, but we've passed through eco parks, through botanical gardens, we've still got the Japanese garden to go. Super green area of the city and really nice to walk around and escape the city noise.
After relaxing in the Rose Garden for a bit, we walked our very tired legs across to the Japanese garden. This was one of the parks that required an entry fee, but at 4,500 pesos per person, it was pretty reasonable. We always love walking around the Japanese garden because there's just something so relaxing and peaceful about them, even when they're a little bit busy with tourists. If you're in the mood for some more art, then definitely check out the Malva Museum for a look at some more contemporary Latin American works.
So the best part of coming to Buenos Aires in November is that all the jacaranda trees are blooming at this time and they paint the whole city like this purpley blue color. It's absolutely beautiful. I love it here. There are many streets where you can just walk around and enjoy these trees. I mean, now they're already falling on the ground, so we kind of just got here at the right time.
It literally just fell on my hand.
A little further south are the contrasting neighborhoods of Puerto Madero and Monserrat. Puerto Madero is the new, revamped dockside area of the city, whereas Monserrat is its historic heart. In Puerto Madero, we found sleek skyscrapers reminding us of London's Canary Wharf, alongside renovated red brick dock buildings housing upscale restaurants, a little bit like the Royal Albert Docks in Liverpool. In short, it kind of felt like we were back home in the UK. Make sure to walk along the impressive Puente de la Mujer for nice views back towards the city skyline. The rest of Puerto Madero is made up of the Costanera Sur Ecological Park, which has looping hiking trails and lots of wildlife, but we didn't have time to walk around it during our time in the city. We then made our way into Monserrat, with the first stop being the city's main square, Plaza de Mayo. You'd be hard-pushed to miss the bright pink facade of the Casa Rosada, which is the presidential palace of Argentina, at the head of the square. The rest of the square is surrounded by more grand buildings like the National Bank of Argentina and the Metropolitan Cathedral of Buenos Aires. Close by is the famous and extremely popular Café Tortoni, an iconic French-style cafe that has been open since 1858. The line is always long for a table, and we weren't patient or hungry enough at that time to stick around. Then we crossed Avenida 9 de Julio, the widest avenue in the world, with 16 lanes of traffic flowing along it. If you want, you can also head up it a short way to check out the obelisk, which was unveiled in 1936 and is made of Cordoba white stone. On the other side, we headed towards Plaza del Congreso. This plaza is bordered by the Palacio Barolo to the east, where you can take a tour and have a drink at the rooftop restaurant. Dominating the west end of the square is the enormous National Congress of Argentina, which is very reminiscent of the US Congress building in Washington, D.C. Monserrat was definitely not our favorite neighborhood to explore, as it was just a little bit too busy and hectic for our liking, but it is a must visit if you want to see some of the grandest buildings in the city and some of its most historic places.
Just south of Monserrat is the Bohemian district of San Telmo. It's a fairly small area, but it's absolutely packed full of antique shops where you can find pretty much anything you could imagine. You'll find cafes and eateries on every corner as you wander around the cobblestone streets. The entire district surrounds Plaza Dorado, where you'll find craft fairs on weekends, and if you're lucky, spot tango dancers showing off their moves for locals and tourists. Be sure to also take a stroll through the Mercado de San Telmo, browse a wide selection of artesian goods, and sample some delicious looking food. When we were there, actually, it was full of Brazilian football fans in town for a final, which gave us an idea of the passion South American fans show in support of their teams. Casa Ezeiza is worth a quick look if you're in the market for souvenirs or antiques and didn't find what you were looking for elsewhere, as well as Casa Minima, which is the thinnest house in Buenos Aires. It can be easy to miss if you're not paying attention.
From San Telmo, we headed to La Boca, the final and probably the most touristy district of the city that we recommend visiting during your stay. This is a working class neighborhood and had much more in common with the South America that we were used to seeing in places like Colombia and Peru. That's not to say that it didn't have its own unique feel though. Colorful murals adorned every single building and surface, and if not a mural, then it was just painted one bright color or another. It also felt a little like being at the circus, as the signs over the shops and in the streets were very reminiscent of what you might see at a European circus. La Boca is also home to Boca Juniors, one of the biggest football teams in Argentina, and the brightly colored stadium dominates the skyline. If you're lucky enough to be in town on a match day and get tickets, this is definitely a must-do activity in Buenos Aires. Football culture is almost a religion in Argentina, and we saw evidence of this painted across the walls and stores of La Boca. Two players, Messi and Maradona, definitely get the most love though, and you will see their likeness everywhere you look. We also found lots of small little alleyways coming off the main avenue filled with souvenir and antique stores with colorful signs and exteriors. So it's a great place to do some shopping if you still haven't managed to find the perfect souvenir. La Boca is popular for a reason, and it's definitely a must-visit district in Buenos Aires, although a couple of hours was more than enough for us before we started to feel a little bit overwhelmed by the crowds.
Now, if you're looking for something a little more chilled after exploring the busy and loud districts of Buenos Aires, then we've got the perfect day trip for you. Tigre is a town in the north of the city's metropolitan area and is a gateway to the vast area of waterways that make up the Parana Delta. It's a very popular weekend getaway for locals who bring their picnics and take the boats out to some of the beaches within the delta, as well as families visiting the Parque de la Costa theme park. However, it's a great day trip for tourists too and provides a very different experience from the city proper. Getting there from the center of Buenos Aires is very simple. First, get yourself to Retiro's train station and look for the departures to Tigre. They go like every 30 minutes. There are 2 trains though, a direct one that travels inland and doesn't require you to change trains, and an indirect, although more scenic train that travels along the coast, but which requires you to change at Bartolome Mitre station. We actually took the direct train to Tigre and then the scenic one on the way back. But overall, there wasn't much difference in terms of views, unless you wanted to take things a little bit slower and getting on and off at certain stations along the coast. If we were to compare Tigre to anywhere, it would be the south of England, which isn't surprising given the influence English had on this area in the past. Huge, elaborate rowing clubs line the banks of the Tigre River, exclusive member-only clubs that cater for all sorts of sports, including rowing. We took a stroll up the peaceful, tree-lined Costanera next to the river until we arrived at the grand building housing the Museo de Arte de Tigre. This beautiful building is a work of art in itself, so whilst we didn't go into the museum, the walk was still well worth it. On the way back to the town center, we obviously stopped for ice cream at Helado Via Toscana, which is the kind of ice cream you definitely won't find in the south of England.
I've noticed that Argentinians really do love their ice cream, very much like Italian gelato style, really delicious. We've had lots of it since we've been in the country.
We're gonna have even more.
Oh yeah.
The Puerto de Frutos is an old port that is being converted into many souvenir shops and restaurants. It's a good place to spend some time browsing at the end of your time in Tigre.
As you can see, there is plenty to keep you busy in Buenos Aires. We stayed there for 2 weeks, and whilst we did explore at a little bit of a slower pace, there was still so much that we didn't get to do. The city is a real mix of different cultural influences and feels way more like being in Western Europe than South America. We enjoyed that aspect, but probably just because we'd spent so much time in Central America recently that sort of homey feel appealed to us a little bit more. If we'd have flown there directly from Europe, we probably wouldn't have enjoyed it quite as much. Our time in Buenos Aires was a great start to our Argentine adventure, but there is plenty more coming your way from this massive country, and trust us, it only gets more and more epic. So make sure to subscribe if you'd like to follow along on our journey through Argentina, and give this video a like if you enjoyed it or found it useful. We also have a travel blog where we go into a lot more detail about all the different places that we've visited. If you're interested in getting any more information about anywhere that you've seen, make sure to go on over and check that out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you back here in Argentina on the next one.